Welcome to the Trailblazers. I'm your host, Perry Rarick. The purpose of this interview series is to share with you interesting discussions I have with trailblazing business leaders. They're innovative, thought-provoking, they're experts in their field. They are passionate about what they do, and they're not afraid to challenge the status quo. My trailblazer guest today is Dr. Judith Ng-Cashin. She is a biopharma physician, executive, and board member with over 20 years of experience, and she currently serves as the chief medical officer for Novotech. And they are a global full-service clinical research organization. We're going to hear a little bit about them. Dr. Ng-Cashin has served in leadership positions in a variety of organizations, and I'm going to describe them as organizations whose purpose is to improve the health and wellness of society and deliver therapies to patients who are suffering, and in many cases, they're dying from illness and disease. The list of organizations that she is currently or have been a part of is an incredible list. She is an advisor with Duke New Ventures. This is an organization that illuminates technology that can help translate to therapies in the industry, a really important grassroots effort going on there. She has been a board member at the Drug Information Association, Revive Technologies, Eagle Pharmaceuticals, AO Biome, Syneos, INC Research, Quintiles, and GSK. You'll note that she has been in drug sponsor innovator companies and organizations, as well as, I'll say, they're on the clinical research service provider side of the industries. Very unique set of experiences that we're going to hear about, and you'll notice how rich of an experience that is. Her accomplishments span medicine discovery and development, clinical research, clinical medicine, service line management, and management consulting. She's a gifted leader with deep clinical and scientific knowledge. Her areas of medical expertise include infectious diseases, hematology, oncology, and dermatology. And she's here with us today. Welcome to the Trailblazers, Dr. Judith Ng-Cashin.
Thank you so much, Perry. I'm really delighted to be here, having this conversation with you.
And we're delighted to have you. So you're part of an industry, the life sciences, in which arguably every new drug therapy is an innovation. However, aside from the sciences, the therapies themselves, which there's a lot of innovation there, there's innovation everywhere. We're immersed in it. How drugs are produced, how they're delivered to patients, and how we conduct clinical research. So the innovation is coming from all directions. Yet, and I don't want to sound too critical, and I don't want to overstate this, very few innovative therapies successfully complete that journey from discovery all the way to the patient. And we know it's an arduous process. You play a big role in that, and I know you've been your entire career working hard and passionately about helping these innovations, go through that very difficult journey. But Judith, I'd like to start by having you share with us, what does Novotech? So you're currently the chief medical officer for Novotech. They're a global clinical research organization. What do they do, and where do they fit in this very complex process?
That's great. Thanks for that question, Perry. So, Novotech, as you've mentioned, is a global full service clinical research organization. So, we operationalize the clinical trials that drug companies, biotech, biopharma design in order to produce the data that helps them get registered with health authorities and come to the market and ultimately to the patients. So, what's unique about Novotech as a CRO is that we were founded in Sydney, Australia. and for about 20 years ago. And for the beginning of Novotech's history, we were really focused on early phase clinical trials in Australia in particular, but then into the rest of APAC as we grew both organically and through acquisition in the region. And then we were a regional CRO that partnered with other regional CROs or became the APAC partner for some of the larger global CROs for a global trial. Um,
Excellent.
o
Yeah.
Over the last few years, we have, because our, sponsor base is almost exclusively biotech, and they enjoyed the partnership model we have, between small biotech and Novotech, which was smaller at the time, but they wanted to be able to continue that partnership, as did we, into their later phase, clinical trials that were on a global scale. So for that reason, we've grown into Europe and into North America, partially by acquisition and then organic growth through that there. So I'm proud to say that now we really feel we can be, biotech's partner of choice, starting with early phase, first in human studies, all the way through pivotal registrational trials, and stick with them and their technology or therapy, sort of from cradle to um, being reborn as a marketed product.
That's great. The growth seems like natural as you described, success, with therapies and just growing with those therapies. So, uh, I don't know if this is a fair question or not. What are the typical responsibilities, if there are typical responsibilities of a chief medical officer in a CRO?
It's funny because CMO, Chief Medical Officer, means different things in different organizations, in different segments of the industry, like big pharma, biotech, um, and also in the CROs. In some CROs, that position can be sort of a figurehead position where you're publicly facing and representing the medicine and science of your company. In other organizations, it's a very operational role where you have a large functional lines and you're managing profit and loss business unit or some combination of that. And I think what exactly that role is in any given CRO depends on what the skill set of the other C-suite members are, and what the gap or the need is for that person. Obviously, a physician leader. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thank you. That helped me out a lot. So it varies then. It can vary greatly from CRO to CRO.
That's right.
Yeah. So what are your then if we can neck that down into what are your responsibilities at Novotech?
So my role as CMO at Novotech is sort of a hybrid of those two extremes from, figurehead to operations line manager, right? So I have a little of both. At Novotech, I oversee um, four functional service lines, medical uh, services and strategy. So those are the physicians who serve as medical monitors on clinical trials, medical writing, who are the writers who help develop protocols, clinical study reports, um, regulatory documents, etc. Safety and pharmacovigilance, and that's a branch of sort of the medical arm of a study that is specifically focused on uh, safety trends, um, uh, the reporting of safety events to the regulatory authorities, and things like that. And then my last functional line is a group we call Drug Development Consulting, which really is a life sciences consulting group focused on clinical development, regulatory strategy, et cetera. And that group partners with our biotech sponsors to help develop those clinical development plans that are going to get them from point A to point B, whatever that looks like in their phase of development. So that's a big part of my job is managing those groups, both operationally and from a business standpoint in terms of, you know, revenue, margin, et cetera. The other part of my group is really interacting with our biotech sponsors, kind of representing Novotech as medical and scientific specialist sort of company, um, helping them think about their development plans, doing interviews like this to kind of talk about myself and Novotech and where we fit in the whole sort of biopharma ecosystem.
That sounds like an awful lot. How do you and when I think about, you have this P&L, you have these service groups that you're managing, but then also you have this outwardly facing role like we're doing now. It seems like that would require a lot of mental agility to switch between the two. How do you balance all of that?
Well, I think the first thing is it's not just me, right? I have my own staff, I have team members, colleagues. We're all doing this together. So often when I'm visiting, one of our sponsor partners, it's not just me, right? There are other people along to kind of help understand what their situation is and how we can best help them. And then on the operational side, all of my teams have really strong, experienced senior leaders who I can check in with and trust that they are doing what they need to do with their teams. So it's certainly not a power of one sort of issue, Perry. I mean, there's a whole village that supports this thing.
Well said. Yeah, of course. Um, so you mentioned earlier that you've had a lot of growth. Novotech has had a lot of some significant growth. Uh, some of that growth came from with your clients, with drug sponsors, as you helped them with success, they grew. They needed more clinical research. The other was through some acquisition, and I wanted to have you talk a little bit more of that latter part, and how that, if you can add a little more color, how'd that come about? Who did you acquire and why?
So that's a really good question because to be successful in that sort of growth strategy, we've had to be very thoughtful and very deliberate, right? So, we think of our special sauce at Novotech being our our intimacy and strong relationship with both our biotech sponsors, but also the investigational sites and the principal investigators. So, like most things in life, it's very relationship based. So we tend and nurture those relationships very thoughtfully, right? So, how do you do that? So, with this foothold in APAC, how do you grow and scale but remain um, committed to those sorts of intimate relationships, which has really, in our view, been the key to our success, particularly with biotech, who might be 200 people, but who might also be, you know, 5 people in one room, right? So, what we did was I mentioned that Novotech in the past had partnered with other regional um, CROs. So we've had these long-term relationships with a European-based CRO that was relatively small and a US-based CRO that was small. And because of those already established relationships, we were able to feel more confident that that culture of service, delivery, and intimacy was something we could maintain despite, if you like, the acquisition process. Uh, don't get me wrong, there are bumps in the road, but that's the overriding philosophy in the way we've tried to grow. And
Yeah.
then from having a foothold through those acquisitions, we then were able to grow more organically in both Europe and in the US.
Great point. So earlier you stated in the early days, Novotech was very nimble, small, personal. And as you grow, and especially through acquisition, and you kind of gave us a little hint already that there was a cultural fit, but how do you manage that growth? Like, what are the things you do internally to manage that growth, but still kind of hold on to that cultural strength to be nimble and agile and very personal with your clients?
I'll tell you, Perry, it's challenging, right? And it doesn't happen by accident. It's something that, you know, on the executive leadership team, we talk about a lot, not only from these acquisitions, but even in terms of who we hire in. Are they a cultural fit? And that fit has to do with, um, not expecting a lot of infrastructure around what you do day to day, like rolling up your sleeves, getting into it, not only within Novotech, but also for our biotech sponsors and partners. But it's really along the way enforcing um, an attitude of collaboration. Um, and cultivating that continued relationship, pointing out where existing culture and process was already consistent with kind of how we did it at Legacy Novatech, and just trying to make that transition, um, highlighting how we're kinda already halfway there. I mean, it's not perfect, and there are in any transaction like this, there are gonna be, employees who prefer to do it like we used to do it, and that's where it's challenging, really, because everyone's valuable and we wanna retain people, but ultimately, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. So I think it's just being frank about those situations as well.
I had my first contact with someone at Novotech about a year ago, and I've gotten to speak to a number of people at Novotech, and I wasn't able to articulate it, but I felt the way you're describing. It seems a lot smaller and more intimate and personal than the size of the actual company. So it comes across very clear, although I wasn't very able to describe it
Well,
as
you
you
don't live in it every
outlined.
day like I
Yeah.
do.
So I want to change subjects slightly. Um, I introduced this by talking about some of the innovation that's coming from all directions as we move these potential therapies all the way to commercialization, and the clinical research space is also undergoing innovation. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about that. Like, where is it coming from? What are the major innovations? What are your thoughts on that?
I think when we talk about innovation in our industry, as you pointed out, Perry, we tend to focus on the scientific innovation that drives the creation of new therapies, right? And new technologies, new molecules, etc. But like you said, there's the whole operational part of generating the appropriate data to give us confidence that we have a medicine on our hands that has an appropriate benefit and risk profile for whatever patient we're trying to treat. So I have seen over the course of my career sort of stepwise innovation that makes the operation and execution of clinical trials and the data collection more efficient. Things like moving from a paper um, CRF to a electronic file. That has decreased administrative work. I think there are all kinds of platform technologies that have continued to drive that. Certainly, everybody wants to talk about AI, machine learning, natural language processing. Of course, applying these sorts of technologies to sort of the administrative work around delivering a trial, documenting what happened, collecting the data. The automation of that certainly has driven efficiency, where people are really trying to understand how some of these powerful new technologies can do more than incremental change, but big game changing sort of shifts in efficiency and productivity is around finding patients. That's always been the bottleneck in any clinical trial, but particularly large scale global registrational trials. Where are the eligible patients? How do we screen them more efficiently? How do we retain them better? Um, and so I think the great aspiration is that some of these technologies will help us find and recruit and retain these patients in these studies. I think we're working on it. I don't think we're quite there yet. The like I said, the aspiration, the promise is there, but I don't think we've quite solved that major issue. But that's really where I see operational innovation starting to go now and in years to come.
I've heard that from many in this segment of the industry. So we're kind of part way. I mean, AI is scaring people. It's causing concerns in some industries, but it also provides a lot of hope. And yeah, that's what I'm hearing is we're just not quite there, but boy, we're feeling pretty good about some of the things we could
I
do.
would say that. I think it's really understanding how to harness the power of things like AI and really apply it specifically to whatever problem we're trying to solve. In this case, finding the right patients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so with all of those challenges, the bottleneck, what are you doing currently at Novotech? I don't want to completely put AI off to the side, but what are you currently doing at Novotech to address that bottleneck in patient recruitment?
Well, I think, there are many ways to think of innovation. I think what we just talked about with technology is one. Another strength that has served our sponsors well is for people to be creative, open minded, and innovative about how, how they think about where they're recruiting patients. I think when I first started in industry, there was a real focus on Western countries, North America, Western Europe, because that's where the regulators were. That's where the scientists and physicians were. That's where we all felt comfortable. Those of us who were driving this industry from the West. There was a reticence at that time to go to countries outside of that for fear of IP protection, lack of data quality, lack of clinical trial experience. In the 20 years I've been in this industry, that has changed a lot. And where our original footprint has been, Perry, is where you can find patients who might not have as many choices, for better or for worse, right? Because of where they live. But doing clinical trials in those areas provides access to care, but for the patients, and for the investigators and clinicians. But for the sponsors, it kind of opens the door to a patient population that might not be so therapy exposed. And like in areas like solid tumors, right? They might not have may not be able to receive first line standard of care that's available in the US and Western Europe. In I'm talking about areas like China, Central and Eastern Europe, um, other parts of APAC, where you can be creative and innovative about your study design to really capture the right patient population that gives you the best chance of showing a treatment effect. So thinking innovatively that way has served a lot of sponsors well, and we're a great partner for that kind of thinking because we've been operating with those intimate site relationships, investigator relationships we've discussed for 20 years now. Um,
Yeah.
so I think it's a nice balance between leveraging technology and then thinking creatively about where the right patients are for what you're trying to show in your experiment, right? And a lot too is driven by cost and speed, which we can deliver in other parts of the globe.
Yeah, that's fascinating. One is a kind of a mind shift approach to this to be more creative and open minded in what you said. But it also still sounds like hard work
Oh,
when
very
you
much so.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, you might get AI to be able to write your case narrative, but you still have to, know how to interpret it, right? And make sure you get the case to narrate, I guess you can say.
I didn't want to go past that too quickly. It's hard work, and you
Yeah, it's
think
hard
about it. He's
by staff that are in country who understand the local, not just the local medical standard of care, but the local cultures about how people feel about being in a clinical trial, how investigators feel about participating in a clinical trial. And all of that is important on a local level to get a global study done.
yeah. Really, really interesting. Maybe you can offer an example. You recently had some great success with it was a gene therapy. Talk about cutting edge gene therapy trial. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're really proud of that. This was a partnership between Novotech and Tune Therapeutics. And what they have is an epigenetic gene silencing technology that they applied to chronic hepatitis B infection. Hepatitis B is an area that we have a ton of experience with at Novotech. Um, in large part because of the epidemiology of chronic Hep B, being, very high, uh, incidence and prevalence in the Asia Pac region. So, we were able to combine our operational expertise and partnership with this, innovative, uh, platform technology, around gene silencing, the hepatitis B virus, um, to really get a powerful, perhaps curative therapy um, through from early to late phase development. So that's been a really exciting experience for us, both because it leverages what we're good at and what we're innovative at, and that kind of is a synergistic effort with what Tune was doing with their technology. And then address the significant medical need in patients with chronic hepatitis B. So we're really proud to have been a part of that. And in fact, we were awarded Sightlines Partnership of the Year for that effort this year. So, I think that in a nutshell, that whole experience highlights the sort of partnership model we have with biotech and how that can be, a one team thing, something we always talk about between CROs and sponsors, but something that was a reality for that particular program.
Yeah, congratulations on that. Um, so gene therapy, an epigenetic, therapy is much more complex than just trying to treat some symptoms of some minor minor illness. So how is that different in when you're running those clinical research trials?
Well, I mean, I'll take that from the standpoint of dealing with advanced therapeutics. Like, I spent the better part of my early career dealing with small molecules. It's not like it's that easy, right? I mean, they're just different issues, right? And I think
I didn't mean to make it sound that way.
no, 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 I'm teasing. Um, but there are certain with some of these advanced technologies, there are kind of newer operational things that you have to think about because quite rightly so, you know, shipping, handling a small white pill that's stable at room temperature can be very different than some of these gene and cell therapies that, perhaps need cold chain storage and transport, might need to be manipulated on site at an on site pharmacy. So, the nature of those sort of technologies makes, the CRO side from an operational perspective have to think differently about how they get that intervention, that therapeutic from point A to point B, processed in the right way at point B and delivered to point C to the patient. So those are the sorts of things that really require a partnership because each side can't know what they don't know, right? In how this might be different. Um, and so we need to know that about the technology, but the sponsor needs to know from us if that is the requirement for your product, then we need to add all these other things to ensure that it maintains its integrity over the course of the study.
So during that, Judith, you may have, learned some new things, or you may have just confirmed some of the things you already do. When you got your team together, uh, to kind of do the lessons learned, what were the things that you learned that, you know what, we want to do more of this?
I think, listen, this is anyone in this industry is here because they are mission and values driven in my view, right? There are lots of other jobs we could all have. Um Especially around getting important therapies to the patients. This is all about access to medicines, right? So I think right now the world and the industry is experiencing such a rapid pace of change around what's possible and what's needed, right? And so really all I would say is like in anything else, be really open to understanding is are there things I don't know I know? um, and trying to plan for what's in front of you. Cause I think sometimes we can get into a cut and paste sort of. We've done Hep B before, as an example. We do it like this, we do it like that. We'll just lift this out of a previous protocol. I think really getting to the science and the medicine around what is this therapeutic? Is there something different we need here? Is this patient population gonna accept this? This isn't a little white pill. It's not a direct acting antiviral. What does that mean? How are the investigators and the patients gonna feel about it? And really doing that work in partnership with the sponsor up front. I think that is what sets you up for success.
Thank you for that. That's great advice. That's really meaningful. Judith, you recently attended the bioannual conference. What did you learn there?
You know, I learned that all the things we're reading and feeling about the funding environment, and the uncertainty and the volatility around that is true. I think it's if you're a biotech company that's trying to raise money and you don't have a ton of data that de-risks your program, it's incredibly hard right now. I think there are many factors, including, the reality or potential of tariffs, one from US, China, whatever it is, that's affecting the markets. There's what's going on at the US FDA that makes people a little concerned that they're not gonna have predictable responses or response times. Um, and then there's, just an overall risk aversion because of that and the geopolitical situation with, wars. It just feels very uncertain, and what that does is make the investors, I think, a little more risk averse, right? And biotech is risky. As you said earlier on, very few make it from early phase to market authorization. Um, and so it's already kind of a risky business, and people aren't really looking to take on more risk. Even in the face of that, people are driving forward, trying to generate meaningful data, trying to move the needle forward, um, because of the passion people have about the work they do. So, I guess my overall takeaway is even in these trying times, people are still doing what they do and trying to advance, their medicines, their therapeutics.
Well, thank you for that. That's, with that big ray of hope, that you placed on this
I
news.
hope so for all of us, right?
Yeah, there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of challenges, but certainly the people I know, like you, that I meet in this industry, seem to be up for the challenge. They don't jump into this because it's an easy job. It's tough work. Thank you, Judith, for being with us today. This has been extremely valuable. I've really enjoyed this conversation. My guest today has been Dr. Judith Ng-Cashin. She is the Chief Medical Officer at Novotech. They are a global, full-service clinical research organization. Judith, thank you for being on the Trailblazers.
Perry, thank you for having me. Really been my pleasure.